war on U.S. soil. This is what God showed me. I have had visions for the past 10 years repeated about war on U.S. soil. This is not to fearmonger. This is not, I'm not selling anything. So this is not for you to purchase anything. This is for the collective people who understand that the energies that we have been under and experiencing is leading us to have boots on the ground in the United States, which we have not seen since the Civil War. So many of us are mentally, emotionally, physically not or underprepared for that type of situation. So this video seeks to help give what the good spirits have given me to give to more people. I have been warning people over the years, but because it was so far out, because all of the cues were not in place, and now more people are starting to see, holy, something is amiss. Some people are still focused on Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, because they seem so far away that they still are not, putting all of the clues together in order to understand how our current way of life and our historic way of life is going to be under siege. So everybody, my name is Randa. I am a educational consultant, a teacher for over 30 years, and I'm also a spiritual educator as well as a creative. And I am going to break down my visions and how this is fitting in the current domestic and global situation that we are facing, right? If you do not believe in spirituality, that's on you. We don't need you in the comments with your doubts. What we do need in the comments is anyone else who have had visions, notions, ideas about what's going on so that we can share them. I will also be sharing ways to prepare because preparation is going to be very important to save as many lives as possible. And Spirit showed me that preparation is what is going to save many people's lives. So people might say, wait a minute, if my building is bombed, right? If my city is bombed, how can I prepare for that? You can, and we're going to get into that. All right, so let's start off with the first vision. I was teaching 6th grade, and we were reading a novel by Percy Jackson, and their word was premonition. And we were reading this text during the time in which Trump was elected president the first time. And I had shared this vision with my students. I never share my dreams, but it was just so funny because a dorky, nerdy kid in the class was in the dream. And so I didn't see this dream as a premonition at the time, right? And so that's why I shared it. And so I was telling them how we were at war in the United States, and it was an Eastern European language, and it turned out to be Russians, and they held us up at machine gun point in a church, right? And so there's certain things that a lot of people, even at war, don't do, right? They don't desecrate, typically, sacred places. And so now we know that these people have no inkling to honor the sacredness of certain spaces. And it was a mixed group of Americans And when I say Americans, I'm not talking about paperwork Americans. I'm talking about people living in this country who would be considered targets of the Russians. And the student Josh was one of the people being held. And the class was like, Josh, oh my God, that's crazy. Because it was just like so weird. So they marched us out of the church into a parking lot that did not resemble a church parking lot. It more resembled like an industrial complex's parking lot where they would have like containers for storage and things like that. And when they took us out there, we band together and we overpowered them. So Spirit showed me instantly that we're going to win the war, right? And so then I started to have multiple reoccurring dreams. And it was always Eastern European, Russian language involved, right? And I saw fighting in the streets in the U.S., in major cities, gunfights on the streets. And if we think about it, because this is prior to Ukraine. And so the footage that we've seen from the Ukraine is people fighting in the streets. It's not army versus army, right? I'm sure the army will be involved, maybe. We'll get into that. Will be involved. But these were regular dressed citizens, right? And so I believe that Spirit is showing me the mixed race, ethnicity, nationality, whether you are a documented immigrant or not. We were all up in that church. Didn't matter the age, we were all up in that church. And in this vision, right, there wasn't specifics, but we were in the streets, right? And so people need to know this information so that they can fully prepare, no matter your status, whether you're generation 0 or generation 20, right? Generation 50, generation 250, right? We need to prepare. Now, what I want to get into is how this is playing out. And I saw this, and I've spoken to other spiritualists who confirmed that they also had visions that there's going to be war on U.S. soil. And so let's get into visions. Number one, some people have different gifts, right? We all have dreams, whether you remember them or not. We all have dreams. And those dreams can give us important information about us, our lives, as well as occurrences regarding other people or a macro situation. Micro would be more like us individual lives, our surrounding community. And macro would be like the U.S., the world stage, right? And so we can receive visions about any or all of that. And dreams can be very symbolic, and so, but there is always a message behind the dream. And there are some people who their gift is very frank, curt, straight to it premonition, right? It's less symbolic and it's more actual, right? Mine can be a combination of both, right? And so I always err on the side of symbolism. And then I watch to see how things unfold. And so from the time that Trump was first elected, Oh, I forgot to tell you, Russian collusion. A student came into the class, and this was weeks after that discussion, and he was like, "Miss, you had a premonition." I was like, "What are you talking about?" "Russian collusion. You, Josh, in the church, held up by the Russians." That's when I was like, ding, ding, ding. And I've always had very telltale visions before, but nothing of this magnitude. So let's get into number one, Russia. It is always Russia. Not to say that it will only be Russia. Now, why Russia? Right? In the 1980s, there was a collapse of the Soviet Union, and the Cold War was ended because of that collapse. And democracy was seen as the victor, as winning, because democracy and capitalism was still excelling, right? So Russia has never stopped the fight to be a dominant player. But what happens is sometimes when something collapses, you have to take a step back. You have to redesign your plan, right? And so Venezuela and Cuba both are allies of who? Russia. And right now, we have illegally gone into Venezuela, captured kidnapped, let's call it what it is, kidnapped their president. No matter what he's done, that's not our role. And his wife. We have killed people on the ground, private citizens, military from Venezuela as well as Cuba. And he is in the U.S. And now the U.S. is influencing the new president. And she gave Trump her Nobel Peace Prize, right? Russia and China both have assets in Venezuela. Now Trump has also cut off Venezuela's supply of oil to Cuba, and Venezuela was Cuba's #1 supplier of oil. So now we are seeing a very critical situation in Cuba where the citizens are being used as pawns, because if the citizens cannot get by with their basic needs, then that is going to put the government under pressure. And the situation in Cuba is very acute. One of the visions that I have, and for people who do not know me, I have a very deep spiritual connection with Cuba. I've always loved Cuban culture, Cuban history. I've been there 9 times. I stayed there a month at a time. I have loved ones in Cuba. I had a spiritual awakening in Cuba. Cuba has provided me so much love and protection. And so I had a vision of mounds of dead Cubans on the Malecón. The Malecón is the main strip where they have a protective wall from the sea to the city, right? And so that's a main strip that a lot of people go on, locals as well as tourists. And the dead bodies were piled up. And I go to Cuba and I'm crying. And the person that I was dating at the time, I'm calling his name, I'm shouting his name to make sure him and his family was okay. And he was in a barbershop cutting hair, and he's not a barber. And a friend of mine who had passed was actually doing hair in there too, but she's from the States. And his face was like, he was not himself. He's a very handsome man, and his face was deformed, not because of like any injury. It was just like, it was big and lopsided, and yeah, wasn't so cute. So you know, that definitely symbolizes change. But there's going to be people who are going to die, and there are people who are going to survive. So I don't know whether this is from this basic embargo cutting off oil to Cuba, or if there's going to be a different type of mass casualty that hits Cuba. But you see how the connections are unfolding. Also, while I was in Cuba, the U.S. Embassy was open, but it was undermanned because U.S. officials were pulled out of the Cuban embassy because American officials were being attacked in their homes, their hotels, their long stay homes with some type of sonic type of attack where their ears, their mind, and they had physical disabilities that are long lasting from the attack, right? And Cuba said they don't have any idea of what's going on for whatever reason, whether it was the US or whether it was an enemy like Russia who did those attacks in order for US officials not to be in Cuba in great numbers. Therefore, there's less intel that they can get. And so this is how Cuba and Venezuela are a part of this plan. Now, Russia, as well as Mexico, have sent humanitarian shipments in order to help. So Cuba still has positive connections with Russia. And so we're seeing how these external countries are playing a role in not only my visions, but how things are going to turn out. Having Cuba that's only 90 minutes offshore with the impending war that's coming to the U.S. is going to be a key asset, right? So Trump targeting Venezuela and targeting Cuba at this particular juncture is key. Now let's get into Israel. So Israel was very central to us invading Iraq and then eventually Afghanistan after 9/11. Satan Yahoo, have been talking about weapons of mass destruction and really egging on their allies to be anti Middle Eastern countries who are not cooperating with Israel. Iran has been one of those countries. Iran is said to fund subversive groups like Hezbollah, ISIS, in order to continue to agitate westernization of the Middle East. And sanctions have been placed on Iran for potential nuclear issues, as well as funding these subversive groups. And so now Iran has been at war. Israel has been at war with Iran. Iran, for the most part, Not fully. And don't forget, we don't have to have a perfect victim in order for an action to be illegal, immoral, unjust. And so Iran has been, messing with, Israel has been messing with Iran for whatever reasons. And so Netanyahu stated that he doesn't care if his allies support him in this war or not. They're going to bomb Iran. Trump stated that he's going to think about it for about 2 weeks. And within 2 days, they bombed Iran back in June. Now, this is the way spirit works. With most of us, and I'm only going to speak for myself, right? I actually, driving Uber, picked up a person who was a part of a cell. I have been to Jordan, and many of the Iraqis who fled Iraq after 9/11 and got asylum in Jordan came to the U.S. And this is the trajectory many cell members have gone. There are also other ways. And in talking to him, it was very clear. I'm not going to get into the particulars of that story. I think I do have a video that does address that. So, yeah. So the attack on Iran is to bring this war, a greater war, about, right? Why? Everyone's saying it's for oil. I'm going to go different. Oil is a part of it, but oil is not the reason. The reason is the New World Order. We have been talking about the New World Order since the 80s, 90s. And I'm sure some people have been talking about it prior, but I was a little girl, so I probably didn't hear about it. But definitely in the late 80s, early 90s, we've been hearing about the New World Order. The United States is currently coming up on this 250th anniversary. And on average, most empires, it's not just a country, it's an empire, longevity is about 250 years, right? So the U.S. and other countries have been preparing for the decline of the United States. And so what is this New World Order? It is going to be who's going to be in control once the United States empire declines. And so this war is going to be a very strategic part. Now, when Biden and Kamala ran against Trump and, what's his name? I'm thinking McClain, but it wasn't McClain. Oh my gosh. Okay, the one that they were going to hang. His name is skipping my mind right now. Put his name in the comments, please. Pence. So, I was not going to vote. I was influenced by all of the BS from both sides of the aisle, and them being two wings of the same bird. And I knew how dangerous Trump was going to be. But I was thinking, well, maybe this is what we need. We need a wake-up call, because people are sleeping on the atrocities that are happening, not only in the United States, but because of the United States, what's happening across the world. And so I wasn't going to vote. And so I used to do readings online, and so I did a live reading on the election, and it was like a week and a half before the election. And the reading spirit kept saying the votes are going to be a shit show. The votes are going to be a shit show. Now you know this is spirit talking, because we ain't never seen a shit show with our votes. You know, maybe locally, maybe, you know, something like that, but we have historically, besides disenfranchisement and, you know, underhanded things that they've done, we've essentially had smooth elections, not including when it was stolen by Bush because of Florida. Okay, okay, so we're not going to get into that. So I don't want anybody to check me for true history concerning voting, but it's not like other countries where there is overt, just out in the open disenfranchisement, cheating, right? So this was something that's new, and I saw Trump coming for them because he's going to lose the election. And Spirit definitely made it known to me and anyone who was watching that voting was important, because that man is dangerous, right? So I ended up voting. Of course, Biden and Kamala won. Now, and this is why Trump is going so hard this election in order to push this war. Trump announces everything that he's going to do, no matter how outrageous and crazy and anti-constitutional it is. Don't forget, we're crying, that's not the Constitution. Bitch, they're getting rid of the Constitution. Sorry for anybody who don't like cussing. The Constitution, their plan is that that thing is going to be null and void. And that's why they've been violating the constitutional rights and procedures all along, right? And that's why they're going so staunch in this election. Now, he already stated, if we are at war, there's not going to be an election, right? Now, I've already known for a while that Russia is looking at what's happening. This is why you're hearing Russia, or you're not hearing a lot from Russia, right? Russia have made some statements recently, but prior to that, now Russia has been giving Iran intel about the United States so that they can successfully battle. Now, what else did Putin say when he invaded the Ukraine? Any country that helps the Ukraine is going to see hell in their land like they've never seen before. Now, we have to remember, where does this new world order come from? This new world order, because of the top 1%, are spiritual AF. And that does not mean they're on the good side, right? And they know what is impending in the new world order, so they are jockeying into position. And so they're playing the long game, right? And so the top 1% basically controls the officials in most countries. Definitely in the United States. Trump is not the boss, but he's so outrageous. He's so not a part of the system. And this is why they need him, because he's willing to say and do what he needs to do in order to put the people that he works for in control of the new world order. So we have a bipartisan system. We have two parties that are always vying for control, the Democrats and the Republicans, right? And this is why these political fights, locally, statewide, and nationally, are so important because they have different allies, bosses, right? So the Democrats are more for certain corporations in Wall Street, right? And so when they win, then they benefit. And so the Republicans have Silicon Valley and many top 1%ers in their pockets. And this is why they're always giving tax breaks to the rich so that they can keep them happy. And so as they're jockeying for position, these are some of the people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, right? Because number one, as the country's demographics shift to more brown people, and this is why they started to allow certain groups to call themselves white on paper so they can maintain a high number, but that number is dwindling. And they want to make sure that they remain in control as the demographics shift. This is why there was such a staunch attack on brown and black immigrants. And this does not mean that brown and black people with legal status are not off the table. And we've seen how people have been attacked because they don't know, right? And in terms of the long game, definitely not off the table. So, and notice how they lied and they said that they were going after criminals, right? In order to justify in the most simple American mind that this is necessary in order for them to build out their long game, right? So the United States know that its empire is going down. And I believe that Trump is going to sell out to the highest bidder. Now, what I saw, I had an inkling, I should say. I think it was like a year ago, that the collusion with Russia is more about allowing Russia to attack the United States, putting us in position to be attacked, because then someone has to control the United States within the United States. And we saw Trump really hoard the idea of being a dictator, right? And so it makes sense. I'm actually going to ask Spirit about that specifically. But there's a lot that is not on the table. This past election with Kamala and Trump, I covered that spiritually online as well. And Spirit kept saying, they're up to something, they're up to something, they're up to no good, they have a plan, right? And I didn't know how it was going to unfold. Biden's mental condition was not. I mean, it's an actual medical, physical condition, mental condition that was declining, but it wasn't natural. It was supernaturally imposed upon him so that they can have an angle that he's not fit, because the way that the economy was making a rebound and all of the positive things that he did that are documented, whether you like the man or not, they needed to disrupt. I'm telling you, these people are using black magic. Why do you think European kings and queens outlawed spirituality and attacked women, calling them witches, because they did not want their power being siphoned from people who have God's insight? Because if little Harry from the village is supposed to be the next king, oh no, that woman who is connected to God cannot let little Harry and his family know, and cannot let the greater community know, because then the people are going to be behind little Harry or little Harrietta and then dismantle their power system, right? And while they outlawed spirituality from people, they were using it themselves, and they continue to use it, right? So although spirituality is looked down upon, if you're not following the Christian norms of which the kings and queens intercepted, change things within the Bible, change things within the church to not align with what Jesus and many of the prophets have spoken about, taking out Mary Magdalene's voice, St. Thomas' voice, the book of Enoch, all of that was part of the Bible, right? And so, like I was saying, they are spiritually in tune, not to mean that they're on the right side, right? And so now in the US, spirituality, you can use it openly, but it's still demonized because people have been indoctrinated in the monotheistic religions in order to siphon it out so that we're not aware. But look at God. God still talks to us. God still shows us when things are not right. So that's one way in which they stole the election. The other way, I think it was manipulation of votes, and we have evidence of that, right? And that evidence is still uncovering. And so that process is very slow because the powers that be is more interested at saving the union and the perception of the union than it is to things being right. This is why Al Gore seceded to George Bush, and we know Florida was a part of suppressing votes and stealing that election, okay? And so the same thing has happened, and Elon Musk has stated, I'm the reason Trump won. And we have some evidence that has been talked about, but it's been very low. And so that election was not won. All of a sudden he gets the majority of votes and the Electoral College. We're sway. And we saw Camilla's support throughout the country. So every time someone says, you voted for him, I don't think most people voted for him. I don't think those numbers are correct. And I think that's what Spirit was talking about now that some of that information has come out. I have not checked on that spiritually since that time period, the election time, and right after. But I think that's going to take, it's going to be a good idea to look at that, piece again, because he has to be in place in order to support Israel. The Democrats would not have, more than likely, supported this type of action with Israel. Israel would need to do what they normally do, and that is to have their okayed people to stir up some ish, to pay for adversaries to stir up some ish, and cause a big bang in order for the U.S. to participate in something, right? Like 9/11. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about who actually flew those planes into those buildings and how those buildings actually came down. And we're going to leave that right there. I have not looked into that spiritually. And again, that's something that may need to be looked at again. So, God always gives us the 411. And it's up to us to listen, right? So, there was an author, I forget his name, but he was a German who migrated to the United States. And he wrote a children's book. And the lead character name was Baron Trump. And he had a little dog, and then they would time travel. And in the last book of the series, there was a character named, I think like Don Frump or something like that. It's very similar. And he was this wicked U.S. president that was very controversial, who lived on Fifth Avenue in New York. And destroyed the U.S. economy. Not funny, but irony is hey darlings, I love it in this yard. I'm gonna do a video on where I'm at and everything. And so Nikola Tesla allegedly had some time travel information that he had researched and he had blueprints and information about. And when he died, the U.S. Department of Aliens, something like that. Aliens meaning people who are not U.S. citizens. When he died, they went into his apartment in New York, seized all of his property. When does the government do that? And guess who was in charge of that department and the seizure of his property? I believe his name was Don Trump, but it was the uncle of Donald Trump. And they're like, I think his apartment was not far from the writer of the text. So Donald Trump is a part of the unfolding of biblical prophecy. So, on the negative side. So, Netanyahu, who is not religious, and many Zionists are not religious. And they do not descend directly from that piece of land that they have colonized. And they have usurped the indigenous Jews who stayed there. Right? And so it is very important to Israel to get to this war. And I'm not talking about with just Iran, but to get to this war, this bigger global war, World War III, in order for the Messiah to come forth, because they believe that they're going to be the victors. Now, this is not all Jews, and we have to stop putting all Jews into one category, right? There are so many Jews who are anti-Israel, and so many Jews who are good people. There are so many Jews who are pro-Israel, but only because they've been indoctrinated. After World War II and the Jewish Holocaust, the European Jewish Holocaust. And that whole never forget movement, religious school every Saturday, the bringing in of survivors from the Holocaust with their numbers tattooed in their stories. So this was a part of the propaganda to start Israel and to maintain it. And then let's not talk about the free citizenship, right? So these powers that be have been in cahoots, right? The U.S. is not supposed to win the war versus Iran because our time is up. Doesn't mean that the U.S. totally goes away, but the empire, its current status, has to shift. So the U.S. is not supposed to win the war. Can Trump be in cahoots with Putin to put all the ducks in a row? Because Putin is the one who helped him get elected the first time. All the disinformation, the misinformation, the riling up of civil unrest on the internet, pitting Americans versus Americans. Right? So I am actually going to take the time to go deeper with Spirit and to ask Spirit specifically about that connection. So wait for it. Okay, so yes, I just checked, and there is definitely Russian collusion with the administration. We already know that he has been impeached for collusion, but the votes did not go in the way of getting him out of office. And that it is not going to work. Their plans are not going to work. and that spell work is indeed being done, and that they are trying to sabotage the United States. But if we use endurance and we tap into our individual and collective divinity, that is it doesn't matter what religion you are or how you practice spirituality, God is truth. It's getting to the truths. And you use that in order to guide you. That endurance that you plan and build out and use is going to help you navigate and prepare for this atrocity. And that we have the ability to sabotage the sabotagers. It is also being shown that there is another major party that's included in this. And what I got from Spirit was China. And it brought me to when I had a conversation with a youth pastor who had a dream about boots on the ground in the U.S., where he saw Chinese persons parachuting into the United States with machine guns, right? And again, we haven't seen war on this land since Civil War. And we saw how war was fought differently in Vietnam. And now we're in 2026. This war that has already started is going to be fought differently. And so we have to prepare. How do you prepare? If you look at what video footage we can get from Iran and Israel and the Middle East, have you noticed that even in the midst of war, everything is not demolished? Every building is not hit. We're watching people watching missiles go to another building or area and decimate that specific building. So, one of the questions people ask is like, how do you prepare for war, if a bomb hits you? The chances of a bomb hitting you in particular are not great, especially depending on where you live. So there are ways to prepare, and Spirit actually showed me that the majority of deaths are going to be because the people did not prepare. And if you live in a metropolis, especially in New York City, especially with the election of Mamdani, that it is going to be especially hard hit and attacked because of his stance on Israel. And you want to make plans to be able to exit that city should it be attacked if you do not have the ability to move out or to move to a safer place that may not be under attack, right? So having those travel plans. Food. You need 30 to 90 days, 1 gallon of water per day per person. So yeah, that's 90 gallons of water for a person, one person, if you're preparing for 3 months, right? Because we don't know how resources are going to be impacted, how travel to get to resources is going to be impacted once things escalate to a certain level, right? Now, the US dollar is also under attack. The petroleum dollar is already under attack, and as we saw from the literature prophecy that he's going to tank the U.S. economy. We are going to get to how to keep cash on hand, but if the economy tanks, if the dollar value tanks, that may not be your barter system. And so you may want to have more of any of these supplies so that you can barter with people as you need to once boots are on the ground. All right, now food. You want to have 30 to 90 days per person, enough of non-perishable, food, stable food, rice, canned vegetables, canned meats, soups, anything that's shelf stable, oils that are healthy but do not expire well. Ghee is one of them. So taking butter and turn it into ghee, excellent type of oil, and it's shelf stable. And you can actually make your own butter and then make your own ghee should resources evaporate, right? Start looking at survival videos to get some notions of what you can do for lights. Like there are forever candles that you can make should our energy grid be attacked, and it more than likely will. I just saw a video how China had access to over 200 local energy sources, and they were in the actual unauthorized utilities, so that the thought is if they have access and they can manipulate access, they can disrupt the power grid and water supply. So we have chemicals in the water. All they have to do is shift the amount of additives that would poison the water. So this is why water and food is so important for you to have. This is why Spirit is saying preparation is important. Next, you also want to have medical supplies. You want to have a first aid kit that is fully supplied with bandages, antiseptic, peroxide, painkillers, anything that you can think of that you would need a supply of. If you have prescription medications, you want to have supplies ahead of time. There is a way with your insurance company, you can plan for emergencies, and you have to actually fill out specific paperwork so that you can get an extra supply of that life-saving, quality of life medicine ahead of time, right? Especially if it's not a narcotic, then you can get it, but you have to talk to your insurance company and get the right procedures. So people with diabetes, people with heart disease, all these different types of medications that help. You want to have a good supply on hand in case something happens with our pharmacies or your ability to get to the pharmacy. Okay, if our supplies are disrupted by the war and they're not available, right? You definitely want to get that together. Energy, right? You want to make sure you have solar panels. I don't know, I got transformer, but generators, Generators are also very loud, so it announces you. And after Hurricane Maria, so many generators were stolen because they have to be outside. And so there are smaller solar units that are pretty inexpensive, and you can plug in the necessities for them. You'll be able to charge your phone, and you can put it outside, or you can have it near a window or door where you can get sunlight and it can charge. I talked about the candles, forever candles. There's things that you can use. I mean, you can really YouTube those things, where you can use a jar of Crisco grease and a wick, and that will like burn for a long time. You want to be able to conserve energy at night, unless you have like a built-in generator into your house, like some companies have, right? After hurricane, I think it was Irene in Puerto Rico when I was living there, they had like hotels would have automatic backup generators that were built in, not the ones that we typically use at home. So I'm sure those are available for houses, for people who have more financial stability to plan that way. So you want to think about ways in which you can cook, making sure that you have maybe like a grill, something that does not take as much energy. We may not be able to use our stoves and ovens, so making sure that we have backup ways to cook, which gets into transportation, because some people may have to leave their homes, right? And so you have to have a plan B if you cannot stay in your home. Where are you going to go, right? And some of this, you can start planning, but you have to use the knowledge as it unfolds in real time during that time where you can go. Cars can be attacked because most of our modern cars have an electrical motherboard, which can be attacked by outsiders. And as we know, there's collusion, so insiders too. Gas guzzlers, old cars that do not have a motherboard, can be very beneficial, but our gas is more than likely going to be disrupted too. So think of other modes of transportation that you are going to be able to use. And don't forget, the electric grid may be impacted as well. So if you have any ideas, definitely put it in the comment area. Ideas and even knowledge, right? You definitely want to have batteries. You want to have batteries. You want to make sure that you stock up on your flashlights. For communication, make sure that you have plenty of operational cords for your phones, and that you have ways to charge them, but the phones may be under attack because of modern warfare, right? And you want to make sure that you have other ways to communicate, especially with family and friends. So one way is two-way radio, okay? And you also want to have battery operated or hand cranked radio. You have to have these old school techniques in order to be able to communicate with people and to get information, up-to-date information, for your survival. Let me see. Is there some? Oh, okay. And then you want to keep cash on hand and small bills. Now again, the American dollar may be under attack, right? It may be devalued, and so money may end up becoming useless. If that happens, then right now, based upon what you have of value in your house, food, water, batteries, medical supplies, you're going to be able to trade and barter, get something else that you need from someone else, and you have something that they need, right? So consider that also. So you have that 30 to 90 day rule for those supplies, but you want to consider getting, if you're able to, getting extra so that you will have plenty to be able to barter with. Also think about, if you need to move areas, how are you, depending on how many people are in your home, how are you going to transfer these supplies, right? All right, so I hope that helped. I'll have in the comment section, I will have a breakdown of the list that is just more succinct in case I forgot something. And love to hear your knowledge, your ideas of what can help prepare people in this incoming time of need. I almost forgot. You need a pum pum. You need a pum pum. You need some pum pums. And them suckers are expensive, right? And if there's anybody in your family who right now, because of legal reasons, cannot have a pum pum, you want to make sure that there's a pum pum with the name on it that somebody in the family gets. You don't want them to have the pum pum before it's time, because you don't want them to be locked up and not an asset, right? And so people who are legally able to purchase it, have it underneath their name, keep it, and then when the time comes, they have a pum pum too. Okay, blessings to everybody.